Hello everybody. So I'm going to do a quick demo just to show if a custom MIDI Footswitch I've come up for my Darkglass Microtubes 900 V2 amp. So this is the amp head here. Some of you may or may not be familiar with it, but it's essentially a 900 watt Class D bass amp. It comes with its own foot switch, which is basically got one button. It's either clean, distorted or muted. You can buy another foot switch called the super intelligent foot switch, which allows you to switch between clean, the two different distortion flavors, and then muting the thing. It's got lots of onboard buttons as well, which are quite helpful. So like you've got a mute function, you can turn the distortion on or off, change between the different distortions. And if you look on the back, there's an impulse switcher, so we can press this button and switch between several, either no cabinet impulse, so blank, or one of the three cabinet impulses you have loaded on with the Darkglass suite. And there's also a MIDI input on the back, so you can use that to plug that either into your interface or MIDI foot switch, and you can program it to make it send commands to the amp and make the amp behave in a way that you dictate. The Darkglass suite itself allows you to define your own custom MIDI maps, which is what I've got here, but we'll get onto that in a moment. So here's the unit itself. Let's turn the backlight off. So this is a custom MIDI foot switch. There's 6 switches on there in total. It can be powered off my power brick, so it comes off the 9 volts off the power brick, and then it goes into the back of the foot pedal and uses an Arduino Mega 2560, and it uses the onboard voltage regulator to regulate the power down to 5 volts. Alternatively, you could power it by USB if you like, but then importantly, there is a MIDI output on the back just here. It's hard to see, but turn the backlight on helps. So yeah, there's a MIDI output on the back there. Now, this has already been pre-coded, so I'm just going to plug the MIDI in now, and then I'm going to press some buttons on the foot switch and show it have an effect on the amp head itself. So at the moment, I've got the foot switch set to mute. So let's get in for a good look on the camera. Let the light adjust. There we go. So the top two switches correspond to cycling through the impulse response slots and turning on the compressor on and off. The bottom 4, left to right, basically turn on, mute the amp, turn on the clean channel, turn on the B3K distortion circuit, and turn on the vintage microtubes distortion circuit. So at the moment we've got it set to clean. Got it set to mute, and at the moment the amp has got the light on to indicate that it's muted. Now what you notice is that this doesn't respond now. This is because the MIDI commands are overriding the commands from the from your button presses. So I can press these. So I press clean. B3K will change the LEDs to red, and vintage microtubes will change the LEDs to blue. So I'm going to grab my bass now and prove that it works. So if I set it to mute, shouldn't hear anything. Okay, well, you might be able to hear it through the microphone, but that's the point. If I set it to clean, then I should be able to go. We'd agree that's a nice clean bass sound. And then press the B3K button. So the lights have gone red, and the small LED over here to indicate the B3K circuit is active has gone turned on. Let me turn the drive off a bit just to And then we've got the vintage Microtubes, which is a slightly different distortion. It's a bit more mid-heavy, kind of reminiscent of like the old SVT amp heads and things like that. That kind of 70s distorted sound. And now can demonstrate the compressor function quite easily. So there's a little LED here which tells you when it's compressing. So if I crank the compressor up, then so you can see when I'm playing it, the light comes on to let you know that the compressor is active. So I now press the compressor off button on the unit. So I'm going to move the camera around now to show you the impulse loading function. Now, to make life easier, so by default I have the second impulse slot loaded, which is for me on my mapping it's Nolly's Mega Meld. Now, one thing to note, if I peel back slightly, is if I change the impulse slot on the amp, the LED changes color on the foot unit to let you know that you're on a different impulse response. So I have red for impulse slot 1, green for slot 2, blue for slot 3, and then white to indicate that you've bypassed the impulse loader altogether. So you'll have a pretty horrendous sound without it. So what we should be able to hear is a difference in sound when I change through the different impulse responses. So if I go on the B3K, so I'll start off with my first impulse. Second. And then third. And in case you don't believe me, I'll show you the back of the unit as I go through, as I press the different buttons. So, bypass, no LED is on, slot 1, slot 2, and slot 3. To make this work, I have a custom MIDI map in the Darkglass suite, which I use to, and then in conjunction with the code I've written to demonstrate how the start again. I've got a custom MIDI map here that I use, and in conjunction with the code, I use that to appropriately send the messages to and from. So, for example, I have there's a pattern here, so it basically goes clean, B3K, VMT, mute, and you can see there's like a pattern here. So the compressor on is like the first 24, and then the compressor off is the second 24. So then I've used that to try and streamline the code. So if the compressor is on, you add nothing to the MIDI message. If the compressor is off, then you add plus 24 to the MIDI value. If the clean is on, then you add plus nothing. But then if you have the B3K on, you add plus 2 to the MIDI message. I'll attach the GitHub repository in the video description so you can go and have a peruse for yourself and see what I've done with the MIDI mapping in the Arduino code itself. But that just about wraps up the demo for this little foot unit. I hope you found it useful and informative. Got any questions? You know what to do, and I'll see you later.